Hello everyone. In this video we will understand the strategy to cover disaster management in details. The disaster management as a topic is mentioned in your GS3 syllabus, right? GS3. So we will see first of all the syllabus and see the keywords that are mentioned in the syllabus itself. So this is the syllabus of GS3. In GS3, internal security is another topic in GS3, and you can see internal security has been defined in details in the syllabus, right? So these are the internal security topics, whereas the disaster management, there is hardly any mention of any subtopics as such. So disaster management has been defined vaguely in the GS3 paper. So this syllabus does not give us any clarity as such. So now we will go back to the PYQs and see what type of questions are asked, and then we will decide what to read for disaster management. So we have question papers from 2013 onwards. So recent paper was 2022. So we have around 10 years of question papers, and through these question papers we will try to understand the depth and extent to which we have to learn disaster management, so that we can prepare notes beforehand. So there are a few conclusions that I have drawn after analyzing these PYQs. So generally every year only one question is asked. We will see this in details, but I'm just giving you the conclusion beforehand. So generally only one question is asked every year. However, sometimes two questions have been asked. So generally one question or max to max two questions you can expect. ठीक है, दो से ज़्यादा क्वेश्चन नहीं आ सकते, बिकॉज देर इज़ नो स्कोप. देर आर सो मेनी सब्जेक्ट्स गिवन इन GS3 that it becomes very difficult for the examiner also, for the paper setter also, to give more than two questions, right? We will see these questions in detail also. So now we will see. In 2013 there was only one question: how important are vulnerability and risk assessment for pre-disaster management? As an administrator, what are key areas that you would focus on in a disaster management system? Now this was asked for 200 words and for 10 marks. So this was a 10 mark question, and only 200 words had to be written. So 200 words means 2 or 3 pages. So see, in 2013 the pattern was slightly different, so we can say 2 to 3 pages you were expected to write this question in 2-3 pages. Now this is a very general question. This is relating to the general understanding of disaster management. Now we will see another question. In 2014 again only one question was asked, that is, drought has been recognized as a disaster in the view of its spatial expanse, temporal duration, slow onset, lasting effect on vulnerable sections, with a focus on the September 2010 guidelines from the National Disaster Management Authority. Discuss the mechanisms for preparedness to deal with likely El Nino and La Nina fallouts in India. Now this is a disaster specific question. Unlike the previous one, this previous question was related to general disaster management, whereas this is specifically picked up from a disaster. So this is a disaster specific question. Why am I emphasizing on this? Because this gives us very interesting message as to what we have to prepare in advance, right? Now in 2015 there were, I think, two questions. Okay, in 2015 there was only one question, that is, the frequency of earthquakes appears to have increased in the Indian subcontinent. However, India's preparedness for mitigating their impact has significant gaps. Discuss various aspects. Now again, this is a disaster specific question, right? Earlier question was also disaster specific. This is also a disaster specific question. In 2016 we have two questions this time. The frequency of urban floods due to high intensity rainfall increasing over the years. Now they are mentioning urban floods. It means this is a disaster specific question, right? Discussing the reasons for urban floods, highlighting the mechanisms for preparedness to reduce the risk during such events. Now the second question was, with reference to National Disaster Management Authority (NDMA) guidelines, discuss the measures to be adopted to mitigate the impact of recent incidents of cloudbursts and many places of Uttarakhand. Now we have a NDMA authority, that is National Disaster Management Authority. It was constituted under NDMA Act, and NDMA has a website of its own. On the website they have mentioned certain guidelines, and these guidelines we have to follow. Why? Because the question has been asked from those guidelines. These guidelines are generally vague. You can also guess them, but it is better that you just go through the website once. We will discuss this in details. Now in 2017 there were two questions. First again was asked for 15 marks and second for 10 marks. First question: describe the various causes and effects of landslides. Again, this is a disaster specific question, right? Mention the important components of national landslide risk management strategy. Again, this is mentioned, I think, on your website also. Again, these are general guidelines. We will see them in details. Second question, discuss about the vulnerability of India to earthquake related hazards. Again, this is a disaster specific question, and this is not relating to the general disaster management. Give examples including the salient features of major disasters caused by earthquakes in different parts of India during the last 3 decades. Again, disaster specific question. 2018. Describe various measures taken in India for disaster risk reduction before and after Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. How is this framework different from Hyogo framework for action? Now, this is a disaster specific. This is not a disaster specific question, but a question on general disaster management. Now, there are certain frameworks that India has agreed to. For instance, there is an international framework like, for example, Sendai framework, and Hyogo protocol is also there. Hyogo framework. Now, we will discuss them also in details. Now, in 2019, vulnerability is an essential component element for defining disaster impacts and its threat to people. How in what ways can vulnerability to disasters be characterized? Discuss different types of vulnerability with reference to disaster. Now, again, this is not a disaster specific question. This is relating to the general disaster management. So, it is expecting you to know certain terms like vulnerability. Okay, I'm sorry for this U. Okay, this is V. Vulnerability and hazards. So these are certain basic terms that you need to know before you start your preparation of disaster management. Now, this was asked for 150 words and 10 marks. Second question, define the concept of carrying capacity of an ecosystem. Again, this is not relating to disaster management. I'm sorry. 2020. Discuss the recent measures initiated in disaster management by the Government of India departing from the earlier reactive approach. Again, this is a general disaster management related question and not related to any specific disaster as such. We will see also this in detail. In 2021, there were, I think, 2 questions. Okay, there were 2 questions. First, describe the various causes and the effects of landslides. Mention the important components of National Landslide Risk Management Strategy. Again, for 2 marks, and we have already seen similar question in the past also. So this we can say is the repetition of the previous question. Now, the second question was, discuss about the vulnerability of India to earthquake related hazards. Give examples including the salient features of major disaster caused by earthquakes in different part of India during the last 3 decades. Now, again, a disaster specific question. 2022, that is the recent year. Only 2 questions were asked. First, explain the mechanism and occurrence of cloud bursts in the context of Indian subcontinent. Now, they are mentioning cloud burst. It means this is a disaster specific question. Discuss 2 recent examples. Again, slight involvement of current affairs also, because see, every year there are volcanoes in Indian subcontinent. So, they can ask questions like volcanoes also. So, this was asked for 10 marks. Now, second question. Explain the causes and effects of coastal erosion in India. What are the available coastal management techniques for combating the hazard? Now, again, this is a disaster specific question. Why? Because it is mentioning the coastal erosion, right? Relating to coastal areas. Why? Because we have a huge coastline. If you have seen the southern part of India, we have a huge around 7,000 kilometers of coastline, and that's why this becomes very important. Now, these are the questions that we have discussed. Now, I'll take you back to the syllabus. Now, as I have already shown you, the syllabus only mentions the disaster and disaster management. It means it is not defining that you have to learn Sendai framework, Hyogo framework. It does not define that you have to learn disasters specifically and also the general disaster management. We have extracted these topics from the PYQs analysis. So, what do we understand after analyzing these 10 years PYQs? Now, as I said, generally 1 question is asked and maximum 2 questions will be there. Conclusion would be, there are certain disaster specific questions, and then there are general disaster management questions also. We have seen them. Then, to add certain value to your answers and to make them distinct, to make you fetch more marks, you have to supplement your answer with, wherever possible, you have to add the second ARC guidelines also, and that I have covered already in the video, and I'll also release another video on the same, so you do not have to release the second ARC yourself. Please do not do that. I am wasted so much time of mine. So please, I'll do not waste your time. I'll directly share those second ARC summaries that I have prepared for myself with you. Then, as we have already discussed, we have a NDMA website, right? So these type of questions are asked, and these are very shortly covered in my notes. So for disaster specific guidelines, for disaster specific questions, we have my notes. General disaster management, we have my notes. Second ERC, as I said, I'll be sharing my notes with you, and NDMA website, I'll be taking you through the NDMA website also. So the entire disaster management will be covered in this course, and entire video will be uploaded a few days later, so maybe within a week. So I'll show you just my notes first. Okay, just a second. Okay, so these are my notes that I have prepared. I have gone through multiple resources, and in the end I realized that not many questions are asked from this topic, but I ended up making so many notes. But these are comprehensive and concise notes. In fact, I have taken the help of the notes that are made available by AIR 5, that is Utkarsh Dwivedi. So Utkarsh Dwivedi sir had made these notes available on his Evernote on his blog. So I copied his Evernote notes and added my content, and now I have prepared this. So I'll be discussing this in details in the future videos. So that's it. Thank you so much.